Welcome to everyone on behalf of myself and Frit Landman, FlirtRock and SGI as we partner again to bring you this very important topic, and as we think a topic of great relevance in the boardroom, and especially in today's day and age, getting even more and more important as the days go by. So I think it is going to be not only informative and value adding, but I've got a feeling quite thought-provoking for everybody as well. So keep a pen and paper handy. You may just want to make a few notes. If I can just maybe by introduction just make the point, that the aim, the FlirtRock and SGI focus with the Directors Hour is to really bring together directors and all of those surrounding directors and supporting directors in the boardroom. We're quite conscious of the fact that over the past couple of weeks, we have seen that our listeners and those participating are not only based in South Africa, and also not only from large listed entities. So we do our utmost to actually consider that we've got quite a wide spectrum of people on the call, and we obviously want to make sure that it's of value and worthwhile for all of you to spend this hour with us. And I think today's topic on the role of the board in IT governance or technology and information governance, if I be correct, and cybersecurity is even more so and makes it even more tricky because on the one hand, you've got large listed organizations with huge IT departments and infrastructure and the Rolls Royce of everything that opens and closes as far as technology and information is concerned. But we also have our medium and smaller enterprises that do not have that benefit and that are not that privileged. Yet we are directors, we've got organizations to run and executives, and notwithstanding, we have to ensure that we fulfill our fiduciary duties also as far as the governance of information and technology in our organization is concerned. And as you may have seen, the legislation just keeps on coming, as we saw again this week with the announcement on POPI, which I'm quite sure Prof. von Solms is going to touch on as well. So having said all of that, I just maybe also should point out we were hoping to also have Dr. Peter Tobin on the call, but for some very strange reason, technology just did not allow us to do that. And so we had to agree with Professor Tobin that we are going to schedule a separate dedicated session with him in a couple of weeks and probably focusing on POPI and the implications of POPI in particular. But I can't think of a better person to talk to us on the role of the board on governance of technology and information, and particularly in cybersecurity, than Professor von Solms. I smiled when I saw two things in his profile. They say that he is referred to as the father of information security in South Africa. And Basie, looking at the beautiful grey hair, I can see, I'm glad they're not saying grandfather. As a grandmother, I'm just pulling your leg. The other thing that made me smile was when I saw that you had also co-authored a book on information security governance with your brother in 2009. And the first thought that crossed my mind when I saw that, I was wondering what the family lunch sounds like if you and your brother, around the same table. And I sort of, for a second there, felt for the spouses and the children. I'm just joking. So Professor von Solms, I think, is so well known. He doesn't really need an introduction. He was also, correct me if I'm wrong, Basie, the first person in South Africa to be awarded a PhD in computer science way back in 1973, which means you've had that PhD for nearly 50 years. Absolutely wonderful, stunning accolade, and to think that you've been working for 50 years in this industry, which has obviously resulted in you getting international recognition. I've noted that you've also 2 years ago recently were appointed by the World Economic Forum as a member of their Global Futures Council for Cybersecurity. So you're obviously not just home-based, our expert, but you're a proud export product of the Republic of South Africa internationally and being recognized there. Currently, thank you, the director at the University of South Africa, specifically in the computer science side as well, so, and the Center for Cybersecurity. I think you can talk about that a little bit more, you're also an associate director at the University of Oxford in the UK. So yeah, I think with that introduction, my audience will definitely, if they don't agree with me on anything I said up to now, they will definitely agree with me that we've got the right person in the room to talk to us today on this topic. So welcome, Basie, and thank you so much for taking the time out in your very busy schedule to talk to us. And on behalf of Frick and myself, we really do appreciate that willingness of your side to share your years of knowledge and wisdom with us and our audience today. So with that, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you. You just got to have to unmute your...
Can you hear me now?
We can, thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I wasn't sure that you're talking about me when you mentioned all those issues, but there are two things I'd just like to correct at this point of time. Firstly, I'm a little bit careful to claim I had the first PhD in computer science. I would rather say I have one of the first awarded in South Africa. And the second problem or an error that you made is I'm not at the University of South Africa. I'm at the University of Johannesburg. But my daughter, who is a professor at UNISA, also in the field of information technology and information security, she will, of course, be very happy to hear that I am at her university. But I'm not. I'm the director at the moment of the Center for Cybersecurity at the University of Johannesburg.
Basie, thank you for that. I think it's because I'm an ex-lecturer at UNISA as well. That it's that sort of
no problem.
Apologies for that.
Yes, will you now proceed with a number of questions, or do you want me to just start talking?
I would love for you to just share a little bit of your wisdom and thoughts with our audience, and then we will have a bit of a conversation.
Right.
And again, as always, let me again just remind our audience, you're very welcome to use the chat room to post some questions, and between myself and Frick, we will keep our eyes open and we will facilitate the questioning towards the end as well. Thanks, Basie. We're in your capable hands.
Thanks, Anna-Marie. Welcome to all those out there that's listening. I'd like to start off saying a few words about the concept of IT governance and specifically cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a terminology or a term that's widely used, but very often it is used in a sense that doesn't make sense. Cybersecurity, as far as I'm concerned, and many of the things that I will be saying is as far as I'm concerned, cybersecurity is not a discipline in its own. The main purpose of cybersecurity and of information security, and for that matter of IT governance, is from my side as follows. For any company, whether it's a big multinational or a bank or a small medium company or the pharmacy on the corner, your crown jewels, the lifeblood of your company is your electronic assets, your data, your information, your software systems that process your data and your information. That is your crown jewels. And the purpose of information technology governance, of information security governance, and of cybersecurity governance is, on the basic level, nothing more to protect those crown jewels, to protect that lifeblood of your company. So don't see cybersecurity as something that is out there and is on the internet and all those things, or IT governance is something that we don't really know why we're doing it. We're doing it, we're implementing it, we are rolling it out for one simple reason: to protect these electronic assets of the company. And whether those assets are your customer records or your intellectual property of your company, or whether it is the systems that you've developed or that you bought to process that data, or whether it's the systems to manage your inventory systems, inventory control, and the data that is in those databases, your price schedule, your policy in terms of your competitors. Those are all electronic data, which are all stored in databases, and those assets, that's what your company survives on, and that is what we must protect, and that you must protect. Now, it's in my life so far, in my involvement in this area, and I must qualify myself, I have never formally worked in the IT industry in terms of being running an IT department, or I've never been a member of a board of a company. But this is my research interest over many, many years, and I have spoken to many boards, etc., about this. The idea that I gathered speaking to boards, speaking to senior board members and CEOs, is that very, very often, and I think that is the big risk that we should be talking about today, very often security and IT and cybersecurity is seen as a technical measure. It is seen as something that we from the side of the board can leave to the IT department, to the chief information officer, and it's got nothing to do with us. And I think that is the biggest mistake you can make, for the simple reason, if you look at all the relevant documents, international best practices on governance, general corporate governance, IT governance, cybersecurity governance, including, for example, our King report, then it's very clearly that cybersecurity, IT governance, information security governance is a corporate board responsibility. The accountability lies with the board of the company. You can delegate it, but you cannot delegate the accountancy, the accountability. You can implement or delegate the responsibility to implement it, but the buck stops right with you on the board. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to grow by the moment. Already, if we go back a few years, with the big companies that actually crashed in the United States, many of those CEOs and of those board members are actually at the moment in jail, because they didn't look after their responsibility to protect the assets of the company. Just as your financial assets are important, so are all other assets. And remember, your financial assets very often are also just part of your database, of it's electronic, it's zeros and ones stored somewhere in cyberspace. So that, I think that theme I'd like to develop a little bit more during the rest of our discussion, that IT governance, well, firstly, corporate governance. I think everybody, all of us understands the fact that corporate governance is a board responsibility. The buck stops at the top. But IT governance is just one of the sub-governances that's part of corporate governance. Financial governance, HR governance, that's all the sub-governances, if you can call it like that. And IT governance is one of that. And IT governance as such is therefore the rules, the procedures, the people, the technologies that you use to protect your IT systems. Information security governance is much the same, very much now, not only on the acquirement of hardware, etc., but specifically on the protection of those lifeblood crown jewels of the company. Now, the question very often rises is, if you look at information security governance or information security, where does cybersecurity fit in? And there's a lot of controversy about that. But I think the picture is becoming clearer. If you look at some international best practices, then it's clear that cybersecurity is just a part of information security. Information security is much wider than cybersecurity because it includes aspects like the protection of your IT department, your IT center as such. Cybersecurity specifically has got to do with the protection of that crown jewels when you have access to the internet or to cyberspace, or when your company can be accessed via cyberspace. So there may be companies, very few I think, out there who don't worry about cybersecurity because they have no cyberspace presence. But no company can actually today exist anymore without that presence in cyberspace. You've got your websites out there where your customers can place orders, etc. And that information that provided by your customers is coming via the internet to your systems and trying to work, not trying, but working with your crown jewels. And that is why the cyber criminal has got the same avenue, by actually providing that avenue, that tool to your customers to access your systems, to inquire about your stock levels, and to access and to do their internet banking and all those type of things. The cyber criminals has got the same avenue. So they can come in from wherever they're sitting and they can access, if they're successful, your crown jewels. And that is where cybersecurity comes in, and why cybersecurity is growing and is becoming so extremely important today and in the days that's going to come. And we'll talk about a little bit about the fourth industrial revolution. So the fact now is that most companies cannot survive without a presence in cyberspace, and therefore they provide a lot of benefits to their customers, to their clients, to their patients, if it's a medical system, through cyberspace, because their systems can now be accessed from remote areas. And that's the core, that facility that you provide. You also, in principle, provide that to the cyber criminal, because he's got the same facilities now to come into your system. And that is the core of cybersecurity, to protect the confidentiality, firstly, this triad that we all know about data protection, confidentiality, in other words, that only authorized people may access, may see the data, may see your crown jewels. The integrity, that only authorized people may change or make changes to those crown jewels. And thirdly, that access to those crown jewels must be available when necessary. In other words, CIA. And before we had the internet, we didn't worry about that, because then your crown jewels could be protected through the fact that you had one massive data center, and you had dedicated lines. Many of you will remember the green screens that we had, which were dumb terminals, and you could log on and you couldn't do anything. There were no intelligence in the endpoints. You could just, through a dedicated line, go to the company's database systems or IT systems. But that has changed. We haven't got those dedicated lines again. We haven't got those dumb endpoints anymore. We've got intelligent computers. Every smartphone today is an extremely intelligent and advanced computer. And they are out there, and they are the endpoints now. And the dedicated lines are not anymore the lines that you had to pay an immense amount of rental every month, because Telkom or whoever managed and owned those lines, and you just paid for rental. And that's the big difference. That's a change. And I don't have to tell you as listeners that we're all moving in that area. But the fact is, by doing that, we are increasing our risk immensely, because that's where the cyber criminals are now actually coming in and they start harvesting. And before I go back to Anna Maria again to bring me back a little bit to logics, she's mentioned the fact that last week the state president signed the next version of the Protection of Personal Information Act. And I'm very glad that there's going to be a special session by the Institute about that matter. Because I must tell you, if I was a director of a company, I wouldn't sleep at night with that aspect. I wouldn't sleep at night with that act hanging over my head, because you must go and have a look at that act. It holds you and not the IT manager. It holds the board responsible, because that's part of your corporate governance. It holds you responsible very often in your personal capacity. So if there's a hack and your customer data is compromised, or if there's a hack and your patient's medical information is compromised, then the buck is going to stop with you. I think that's one of the most important acts in terms of IT governance and cybersecurity we've seen in South Africa for a long time. And it's going to be disruptive. There's no doubt about it. And many companies, we've got precisely 1 year from the 1st of July to be prepared of that. So I trust that your next webinar, and I'm glad that it concentrates on that specific aspect, because you must be there. But come back to the whole summary, my summary, which is quite long, is information technology governance, information security governance, cybersecurity governance is a corporate governance responsibility. It's part of good corporate governance, and the buck stops with the board of the company. Let me stop there for the time being, Anna Marie, Frick, and see whether you want to add something to that or steer me in another direction.
Thank you. Thanks, Basie. I'm going to ask Frick to come on board as well, because I think he does have a few questions that he would like and issues that he would like to elicit some discussion on. From my side, I operate in the boardroom, and I understand a lot of the frustration of a director. There is, as you pointed out, there's governance and different areas that we need to cover. A board is normally a smallish board, so we cannot as a board always bring in all the skills that we ideally should have. So we try and have to prioritize on, if these are the number of seats we can fill in the boardroom, what are our priority skills? So technology and information, for various reasons, I think also maybe because of a bit of a lack of the right caliber and experienced person to fulfill that role, or maybe the willingness, but also the priorities as to what skills we have in the board. So you often find boards, they do not have a person with your kind of experience or strong technology, information, IT experience in the boardroom, yet, as you rightly point out, they are ultimately accountable. How do I, as a board member, what would, in your view, if you were, let's say you were a director, knowing what you know, what do you think would be, because, there's information coming to the board. Now, how do I test the integrity of, so if the IT manager tells me I've got nothing to worry about, what questions do I ask? What do I do to actually get comfort that I can trust, what I'm being told?
I'm with you. I will quickly say something about that. Maybe Frick wants to come into. I think that's a very important point. Not important, it's core to the matter. Because with due respect, directors of companies and board members might rightly say, but I'm not an IT expert. How do I know what's happening? What's the status of the company? And my personal view of that over many years is that very often the status of the cybersecurity maturity, the status of the IT governance is reported to the board, mainly, in most cases, by the chief financial officer, to whom the chief information officer reports very often, to whom the IT manager reports. Or maybe the chief information officer has got a position on the board and he reports on that status. And that is a big problem for me, And I think that has to change. And I do see changes in there. You do not, you're not the spokesman for the finances of your company on the board is not necessarily the chief financial officer. He's subjective. He must be subjective because he's looking after the finances. You trust the audit committee and your internal audit, your internal financial audit. You trust their view because they're objective of the chief financial officer. And that is identically the same problem, and it's going to grow about IT and IT assets. The chief information officer can only be subjective because he's responsible. So if there is a big problem in the IT system, I won't say he will not report it, but many of those people will not bring it to the board table. They'd rather try to first sort it out, whatever it is. And that's why I see in the development or in internationally, a development of the fact that the spokesman, if we can call it like that, to the board on IT and on cybersecurity is not coming from the line function. It's not coming from the IT manager or the CIO, or for that matter, even from the CFO. There's an independent report. And I see a development where the risk company, and let's first just talk about big companies where there's, let's say, a group risk function or some type of corporate risk function. That becomes the line of reporting. So there are independent experts, not in the IT department. Of course, they are there too, but there are independent experts, independent in the sense, independent from the IT department, that actually lives in the risk environment of the company. And their purpose is to go and evaluate the risks, the IT risks, the cybersecurity risks. They're not part of that line management, so they can be, if they identify a problem, like your internal auditors, they report that, and that's why they are there. So your point is very, very important. If I was a board member, which suppose I am appointed as a board member of a board, which incidentally, as you at this point of time see, I'll probably not accept, or I will not accept. I will demand the fact that who is going to bring this board up to date, who's going to report the status of the protection of our lifeblood crown jewels, who's going to bring the board up to date on that. And that must not be through the line function of IT. So it must either come from the risk environment, if you've got a risk in mind, or it must be an independent consultant, even that. So because your smaller companies do not have that luxury of having a big group risk department. So the pharmacy on the corner, the owner of that pharmacy, who is basically the board of that small company, and he's not a technical expert. He must get technical expertise, and he should not get that technical expertise necessarily from the company to which he has outsourced his IT, because they are also subjective. They will not tell him, look, we had this problem last week and some data got lost. Oh, let's rather keep it away and hope it goes away or hope nothing happens. I think boards, and even if it's the boards, specifically the boards of small and medium companies, must put their mind to the problem, saying, how are we going to get an independent, objective view of the status of the protection of our IT resources? And I think we're moving past the fact that everything is trusted. Not trusted is expected from the IT department, from the CIO, etc. They are the line function, and we need another line. That's why we've got another line for our internal audit for our financial systems.
Basie, thank you for that. Anne-Marie, if I can come in here with a question that I see in the ribbon from Ayanda Treba. She's asking, what is the trend out there? Do these activities remain within the board risk committee? And I think you spoke a little bit about that. Or do you have a standalone board IT governance structure? Where is the optimal location for this responsibility?
I don't think there is an optimal position. because again, that will happen, or that will change and differ from company to company. But I think the point made by the listener, thinking that there must be something like that, I'm very, very excited about that. Whether you have an independent subcommittee of the board looking after your IT and security governance, who are provided with information through some independent version. Of course, the line function managers, the CIO, etc., must be there, or the IT manager, but they must not be the only source to that committee. It can be an independent subcommittee of the risk committee. Again, that depends on the size of the company, and again, your pharmacy on the corner will not be able to do that because they haven't got all those structures, etc. But the pharmacy on the corner must make sure, because the pharmacy on the corner, the owner or the directors, if they are going to be liable under the POPI Act if their medical information, their prescriptions that's stored on their system, if that is compromised. And again, if you see statistics, that small and medium companies are definitely becoming the targets of the cyber criminals because there are extremely valuable data in there. Maybe they're not so much worried about the financial data that they can steal or the money they get. They're looking very often after at that, or they're looking for that personal information. What medicine is this specific person using, so that I, as a cyber criminal, can now start using that information to create trust with the user, so that I can eventually allow the user, or create the trust with the user, so the user will allow me to do things and trust me if I say I'm from the bank, etc., etc. So that pharmacy of ours, to come back to him, or that owner or manager or whatever it is, he must make sure that he has got something. I can't tell you who that person will be. It will probably be a consultant, but not an IT consultant that manages your IT system. It must be somebody that you see as an objective person that can go back there and say, look, even though your IT, your outsourced IT manager or company tells you that all your antivirus protection on all your end stations are up to date, which of course the IT manager will do, because he doesn't want to get egg in his face. But this independent guy must come to you and say, fine, I don't agree with the IT manager. I've looked at this independently, and I've seen that some of your systems are not properly protected. And that's the risk that you, as the board or the manager or whatever it is, must take note of. And again, how that structure will work from company to company, I can't say. But that it must be there, that I can say.
Frick, I think what I hear Basie saying, and I fully agree with him, is that number one, the board, notwithstanding the size of the organization, but also considering the size and the infrastructure and the available facilities and resources, they need to really apply their mind to this topic. And I don't believe, and I think Ayanda made the point earlier on as well, there's not enough airtime given in boardrooms to this topic for a number of reasons, because number one, there are other priorities, but number two, we are all human beings, and when there's a topic on the table that's not your area of expertise, etc., and you're out of your comfort zone, we like to kick for touch and just nod our heads a few times and move on. So I think boards need to really see how do they, to your point, Basie, be it with external consultants, etc., how do they introduce and put some structures in place that can give them that comfort, that can, that bring that independent view to the table. I'm often worried where I see in audit committees that they are given, sometimes they combine audit and risk committee, and even then as well, then they're given the task of the governance of technology and information on behalf of the board. But from an audit perspective, they look at that from a financial integrity of the financial information, not the broader governance of technology and information that you and I are talking about, that we're all talking about today. And the risk committee often also does not have the necessary expertise. So they leave it to the audit committee. If the audit committee says, so it's like a hot potato, and it's getting thrown between committees, and it's dropping through the cracks, I think, in many organizations. But Amelia Williams also said, and I think Frick alluded to that, or maybe yourself earlier on, that we now changing, the environment is changing. We're going to in future see many organizations with a majority, quite a few of their workforce working from home. And so they have less ability to control the environment within which their team members operate. What measures, what can they do to try and retain some kind of control over that? What do you do? What would you recommend for them?
I think that's part of the bigger problem, and it's part of the growing problem. Very often, the fact is that, suppose now a company, and that's the type of thing, a company wants to roll out a new product, and the product uses cyberspace. And everybody is quite excited because we're going to get a much bigger audience now. We can get more people in, our number of transactions might grow. But they never ask the technical people, what is the risk of going out in cyberspace with this system? Then the system is rolled out, and then there are hiccups, information is stolen, or hacking is done, or you are ransomed. We all know that is the sort of the attack vector of the cyber criminals at the moment, which is on the forefront. You are hacked and you are ransomed. Your data is encrypted. I've got so many emails from a medical doctor saying, I can't access my patient's data. They want some money. And I think that in that case, your point now, Anne-Marie, that, it's you kick for touch. It's not, you haven't got the luxury anymore to kick for touch. You can't say, oh, the HR issue is now much, much more important. We better spend our time, more time on that, or on this, or on that, or our bank loans. Cybersecurity, and that is also in terms of international best practices, must be a permanent standing item on any board meeting. And it should not be, the time should not be used for anything else. Every meeting should have a report back about what the status is of our crown jewels protection, even if nothing has changed from the last one. I think that's one way that the board members will get acquainted. They will get more comfortable because we've got the report back, and it's not that only once every 3 or 4 months somebody come and tell us what the status is. It must be on every meeting. It must be a standing item. And the point is that you cannot, the environment and the fourth industrial revolution, which is just going to increase this problem, you haven't got that luxury anymore, because that is going to be the thing that's responsible. Last point before I see Frick wants to come in. The fact is, if you look at the POPI Act and you look at some other acts at the moment, if that CEO or that chairman of the board eventually be prosecuted and he stands in front of the judge, and that has happened in companies, many companies overseas, and the judge will ask you, what did you do to ensure that your company conforms to international best practices as far as information, IT governance, information governance, and so forth are concerned? And that guy says, look, no, we haven't thought about that. We thought it wasn't a technical issue. Then he's going to be hammered. If he says, Mr. Judge, we are enforcing international best practices. We had our whole IT department accredited to this international norm. You can see we tried our best. Then you'll get away, most probably, much less, with much less problems. And that's the core point. No board member can ensure, and no person can ensure, that there will never be a breach, or there will never be some data hack or some money stolen. The challenge of the board is to always ensure the best they can. If there are international premises, ISO 27001 and 002 are the accepted international standard at the moment for the security of your crown jewels. If you haven't gone that way, if you haven't considered that way, the judge is going to consider you as negligent in terms of that. So this whole idea of international best practices, I think that's a guideline. I will never, coming back to the fact that you want to appoint me on a board, if you force me to do it, I will say I will only accept it if we have got an international certification according to an international standard. How difficult that may be, how much that will cost, that will give the board the peace of mind that we have done something, and we are not only trusting and accepting the information from IT managers.
Basie, we have a conversation going on in the ribbon that touches on this and one of the previous point, and somebody is asking, so if you have this IT governance committee, what should be on the agenda of that? And there's some suggestions here. Well, firstly, the IT governance strategy, then a monitoring plan, and then trend analysis and emerging IT risks should be part of that agenda. Do you agree with that, or what else should be on that agenda?
Oh yes. If we just look at take another step back, maybe we should have started there. If you look at what corporate governance, just look at the concept of governance. If you look at all documents on governance in general, it consists of three legs. The guidance leg, the policies. In other words, what does the board expect from us, expect from the company? In other words, our data must be protected. High-level statements from the board. So that's the one arrow going down. In other words, the expectations, the guidelines from the board about how the IT and the company must be handled. Then on the bottom line, you've got the day-to-day implementation, where these guidelines from the board are changed into policies and procedures, etc., etc. Then people are doing their job. But then you must close the loop. Many companies stop there. The board has got a lot of policies and a lot of procedures how things must be done, but they never get a clue or feedback of whether it is being conformed with. So the third leg, closing up this triangle, is report back mechanisms to the board. And that, I think, there's a lot of research going on in that area that I think is going to grow. In other words, the board must establish mechanisms guided from the IT department to give them that measurement. So what must be on that committee? Firstly, that committee, Frick, as you said, such a committee must be very clear about what is our guidance to the company? What are our expectations? What's our corporate IT policy? What does the corporate IT policy say? And again, never let your corporate IT policy be a document of 58 or 90 or 100 pages. Nobody can read it. Your corporate information security policy, which must start from this committee that you mentioned, must be more than 5 or 6 pages. It must just be high-level statements of what the board expects in terms of the protection of their IT systems. That is then taken by middle management, and that is blown up into specific policies, policy for logical access control, a policy for backup, a policy for information security policy, etc., etc. And so the policies are again supported by a lot of procedures. How do you do that? How do you apply for your access rights, etc., etc.? That committee must make sure that that one leg of the triangle is in place, is updated, etc. Then they must demand to see the leg coming back, completing the triangle on the right-hand side. How do we know that these policies are being conformed to? And if you can't, and remember that's a fact, if you can't measure, you can't manage. So if you can't measure that the policy of, let's say, no unauthorized access to the crown jewels of this company will be allowed. It's a very nice statement to have. But if you don't know how to measure it, how are you going to manage it? So you must have, there must be some metrics that will be able to report to the board saying our access control policies are in place. We haven't got hacks. We haven't got insider people that try to misuse the system. But otherwise, you're flying in the dark. Otherwise, you're sitting on the board. You've got this IT committee, the IT governance committee. They've got all these nice policies and procedures, but you're sitting in the dark. You don't know whether it's been conformed to. And I think if we think about governance, and IT governance is absolutely the same. Corporate governance, IT governance, prescribe, execute, measure, feedback. And the same with your cybersecurity governance. Then they can start asking the right questions. If they have a meeting and they bring in the IT manager, even if their consultant is sitting next to them, and they ask, okay, what's the status of this, that, and the other? And the IT manager or the CIO says, no, don't worry, everything is under control. Then they must trust that person. So trust is another major issue in terms of your IT staff. But I will not even go that. I will go further and I'll say I want an independent option or view of what's going on.
Basie, I think it's you. What I really liked about what you've just said is you've really, in a very practical way, have unpacked what I think we've been trying from a committee point of view as well to always explain the thinking. And I like the way what you said: prescribe, execute, measure. Because you are quite correct. I mean, what does governance involve? Governance involves three key areas. One is, set the strategy. Tell us what is the strategy going to be in this specific area. Secondly, then approve for us the policies and the plans that are required to give effect to that strategy. Then give the ball over to management. They must run with what we've approved. But I need to monitor what they do, and I need to have proper reporting. One of the comments that Janice made in the chat room, and I understand where she's coming from as well, and I think all of us do, that's that fine line between saying, strategic governance versus management, getting into operational issues. And I don't think there's always a clear line between those. I think you're going to find sometimes that we're going to overstep onto the operational platform as well.
Yes. Yeah. The point you're making is extremely very important. You hear from board members, and I think I would have felt the same if I was in that position, that, this guy reported back to us, but his feedback was so unbelievably technical, only he understands what he's saying. And I think that's another demand that the board must make. We want somebody to do this measurement report back leg, this feedback leg that we talked about, somebody that we can understand. Sorry, Mr. IT manager, you are too technical. Don't tell us that we had 5,240 API hacks last week. We don't know what it is. We don't want to know about it. We want to know on a higher level, according to the policies, the high-level policies and prescriptions that you've mentioned that we've given, how do we do that? And it's not easy. It is extremely difficult. But that is how the board is going to get a confidence of mind. And even if they have to go out and pay somebody to do that, like you pay an external audit company to actually audit what your internal people have said, which the CFO has provided to them, that costs money. But at the moment, in South Africa, where I don't think, well, I'm quite sure we're not yet there, that there's a statutory demand to have an IT governance audit by an independent body. And I see that coming. I see that the impact on the critical information infrastructure of a country, the data of a company, is going to become so crucial to the survival of that country, not company, to the country, that we're going to get more regulation to make sure that those assets, and that's actually to a certain extent already in POPI, because we talk about 10 million penalties. We talk about 10 years in jail. So it's starting now, and it's starting on the 1st of July.
Yeah, Frick, have you got any comments that you want to make on that?
No, Anne-Marie, I have quite enough information about that area now, and I think my sense almost is, Ayanda made a previous comment, this area needs extensive focus. And I just become so aware of that because of this almost fluid subject that it needs a lot of thinking and reflection and delve into it.
No, absolutely. And I think this is but the starting point of the discussion. Basie, to your point, in our Companies Act, there is the business judgment rule. And the business judgment rule says that if I can convince a court of law that I've taken reasonably diligent steps, on a specific matter, even though things did go wrong, that could be, a successful defense against potential legal action or criminal, charges being brought against me. And I think that's the point you've been trying to make all through, this hour, is that boards need to sit up, show up, wake up, to say, and I fully agree with you that the whole issue around governance of technology and information should in all probability become a standing item on the board agenda. I think where the board allocates responsibility for that in its committee structure needs to be revisited. And the manner in which that structure, be it a board committee, actually looks at it, that we need to revisit. I read the document and I can't remember. It was also around, because you once or twice referred to internal audit, and it was around the concern whether, with all due respect to the internal audit fraternity, whether they have stepped up to the plate to be able to give that independent.
Yeah.
I think there's probably some room for them to sharpen their pencils and get up to speed quite quickly, to actually fulfill that very crucial role for a board as well.
Yes, I just want to quickly comment on your idea of a good defense. How will I defend myself in court? And your point is absolutely correct. Nobody should say, and it's impossible. There is nothing like 100% security in any company. That's impossible. It is just physically impossible. It is logically impossible. It is emotionally impossible. You'll never get 100% security. And a company shouldn't go for that. Even though your suppliers say, oh, this product will protect you 100%, fire the guy on the spot. If your IT manager comes there and say, look, everything is under control. We've got no risk at all that our systems can be hacked, fire him on the spot. Because that statement cannot be made. There is no such statement. But if you can prove that you've done your due diligence, if you can prove at the board that, look, we did everything we can, but we were still hacked, that is a good offense. But then what you've done must be acceptable. And again, look at international best practices. And for this pharmacy, for example, again, I'm this pharmacy is very close to my heart. But I would say that, there are many big, several pharmacy conglomerates in South Africa that owns a lot of pharmacies or run a lot of pharmacies, although they are under private control. Those companies, those consortiums, those holding companies, call it like that, they should start on something to support their owner of a pharmacy that belongs to their consortium. So they should provide this type of independent knowledge, etc., to guide the guy. And I think that's their responsibility. And if the pharmacy manager then can come back and say, look, I've done everything. I got my consortium, the people that owns my pharmacy or whatever it is, they helped me and we went through this. We did a total review, but we were still hacked. That is a defense. But if you just say, I left it to the company that I outsourced my IT to. Don't ask me about that. Then you put your foot in
No,
it.
absolutely. I think it's taking those reasonable steps. As you say, it's not a fail-proof guarantee, but from the board side, there needs to be very definitely application of mind to this topic. I think the message that came out and came through quite clearly today as well is the increased risk, and that is just going to grow. In fact, when you were referring to the international standards 001 and 002, and I'm thinking about the nature of the criminals we're fighting here, maybe they should go to international standard 007 very soon. Sounds to me like we need 007 somewhere quickly into the room as well. But we're running and sort of closing up as well. So from my side, yeah, I think we've touched on the ears of the hippo here. It is a huge topic, but I think the message that we as from the Vloot Rock and Stellenbosch Graduate Institute, with your very capable support today, Basie, want to give across to our listeners is to say, you need to elevate this topic. It needs to get enough airtime, sufficient, more airtime in the boardroom. You need to go and revisit the way you're doing it. Look at international standards, as Basie say, take reasonably diligent steps so that at least you can show that within, to the best of your ability, you've tried to protect your organization, because this can destroy your business. I know it sounds maybe a little bit dramatic, but I do think that is the reality, that you could be fighting. This could be a matter of life and death for you and your organization.
Just two quick comments on that. Statistics show that that most small and medium companies that has been hacked close their doors within 6 months. They can't regenerate themselves. They can't come back, and that's a fact. So it's not a matter of maybe we can ride out the storm. If you're hacked, you're going to have to close your doors, and many companies go through that. So you're quite right. And I think this webinar, not that I was involved in it, but the fact that you thought about this, that you shared this with 37 people, if I'm right at the moment, I think we start preparing the ground to make this really a relevant aspect, because the country also needs this. South Africa needs this, that we better protect and control our crown jewels. And that includes the government. That includes by all means the government, who's got so many of our crown jewels that they're responsible for. So they are just as guilty as anybody else.
I'm going to start wrapping up. Thank you so much, Frick, unless you've got something else to add at this point. Basie, from my side, thank you. I think what I want to close off from my side is to say, after this hour with you, I would love to join your family for a Sunday lunch. So keep that in mind. Thank you so much, Frick. I'm going to hand over to you to close off for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna-Marie. Thank you, Basie. I want to almost escape my duty of summarizing by staying with Ayanda's statement of this needs extensive focus. But I think Basie has given us that triangle, and I think it resonates with what we are expected from a governance point of view, so that on the one hand, on the one side of the triangle, we have to set, in this regard, we have to set direction, give guidance, see to the policies. Then we have to ensure that there is implementation and that there's talent to implement what we have set direction to. And then, of course, the other duty from a board perspective, to oversee and monitor that line back to the top, saying, but now there must be a feedback loop so that we can really stay within these boundaries of accountability and making sure that we comply with the business judgment rule. So thank you so much from my side. I really enjoyed it. I hope our audience enjoyed it. I saw they participate nicely in the site. And that is the end from my side.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Fred, Basie, everybody listening in. Thank you for the